We continue with our conversation on Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela. For a discussion on the struggle icon's life, I'm joined by Arts and Culture Director General Vusi Mkhize and Small Business Development Minister Lindiwe Zulu. Thank you so much to the both of you for coming in to speak to us this evening. I'm going to start with you, Minister. We are looking at this woman that some feminists would perhaps refer to as a female grotesque, a defiant woman with a strident voice, who has her voice heard, who steps out of the stereotypical female domain, redefines femininity, acts for herself and those people she wants to, and doesn't shy away from speaking about the atrocities and the humiliation she suffered under the apartheid government. What for you is the encompassing image of Winnie Madikizela Mandela?
The encompassing image is that of a woman who understood the challenges of black society in particular, a woman who understood that she had to have a role in ensuring that South Africa changes to the South Africa that we have today, a woman who also had children to take care of in the middle of everything, a woman that also had a husband in prison for 27 years, a woman who was able to hold it together, both in her own family, but also a woman who belonged to an organization, the African National Congress, who up to the last of her breath, she remained a member of the ANC because she believed that in that unity, we would be able to fight the apartheid regime and create a new South Africa. And thank God that she lived for the past 24 years since we had democracy. At least she did get a taste of that democracy, and she did contribute towards a new democracy. So for me, overall, I see a towering figure of a strong woman, a woman that was committed to ensuring that even the poorest of the poor had to be taken care of. She fought up to the last bit of her life.
Minister, I want to ask you about these two qualities that are prized within the ANC. First of all, discipline and accountability to the organization. Do you believe that Mama Winnie was either of those, or do you believe she strayed off that path and went off script at significant times in her history?
I don't think that she went off script, because the script was not necessarily written for a movie. She was living it on day-to-day basis. And therefore, if you live with that kind of life on day-to-day basis, you are impacted not only by what your organization believes in and what your organization wants you to do, you are also tempered by your environment and your surroundings. And therefore, in the process of thinking you're doing the right thing at all times, you will find yourself maybe making not the right decisions, but it's not because she intentionally at any moment decided that I'm going to take a wrong decision. She believed in what she stood for. She could see, she could smell, she could feel the enemy on day-to-day basis, and therefore she needed to respond in a manner that was going to assist in the struggle for liberation.
DG, let me bring you into the conversation here, because we're about to watch a very important documentary that gives her a voice and gives her the opportunity to explain in her own words exactly what her experience was. So as an arts and culture representative, I want to ask you about depictions of versions of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. There are worries that these different versions of her identity and history are being written and rewritten as we speak about her. And how difficult is it to encapsulate that objective experience? Is it even possible to do that in a documentary?
No, it's not impossible. Maybe we must define Mama Winnie as a total embodiment of what a human being goes through, but a human being who goes beyond the normal pain and seeing the normal things that happen around her, because she embodied and personified courage, something that most of us would never have heard to face. And she was walking through a lot of booby traps. So every moment and every second, the regime at that time had to make sure that she is trapped, because they needed to teach everybody else a lesson that if you do not refrain from being a struggle icon, this is how we'll deal with you. So her life, as the minister have said, was not a script written for her to rehearse. She had to respond and react against the most brutal, well-plotted things aimed at breaking her, both body and spirit. And therefore, when we talk about her attributes, we should go beyond the issue of physical pain she might have gone through, because the apartheid system aimed to deal with her at a psychological level. It aimed to deal with her at an emotional level. Separation from your family and your loved ones can only break you unless you have the spirit of unbreakability, as Mama Winnie had. So she's an epitome. She personifies that which most of us would fail dismally to do. Because at that time, in terms of, for us as Department of Arts and Culture, she was then thereafter fortunate enough to be a deputy minister, and that meant she had also now to transform the identity of South Africans. Because remember, arts and culture is an embodiment of everything that unites us. Because through arts, through culture, all your rights, whether as enshrined in the bill, you can exercise them. So she then laid a solid foundation for that which must be a truly representative arts, culture, and heritage for South Africa, and that which means what it means to be a South African who has gone through this pain of apartheid to a liberated South African and lay a foundation for the next generations to come.
I want to ask you, Minister, about these seeming attempts to sanitize some of the memories around Winnie Madikizela Mandela. The notion that either she's a sinner or a saint, she was nothing in between. Are we not tampering with the fact of her trauma, the living out of that trauma at the hands of the apartheid government, by suggesting she was less affected by apartheid atrocities?
For it not to happen ever again, we shouldn't sanitize anything. And right now, my personal view is that here is an icon who we are putting to rest, and may her soul rest in peace. There's a lot that we can learn from her from different angles. You talk about the angle of how the apartheid brutalized her. We talk about her response to that brutalization. We talk about certain things that we might not have wanted to happen in the manner in which they happened, but I say she responded to the challenges of the time in the best way that she could. One of the things that can never be taken away from her is the fact that she believed South Africa needed to be free. She believed that black people deserve better than what they were going through. So she lived it, she epitomizes it, she teaches us to be both. To be bold at some point, to be wild at some point, to be soft at some point. She teaches us to respond to different challenges, but no matter which way we respond to it, it comes out to one thing at the end of the day. How do we change South Africa so that even the most vulnerable, the most ordinary, the most who have no home, as me and you sit here today, can have hope, and hope that South Africa is going to be a better place. And this government of Comrade Winnie Madikizela Mandela is a government that has done the best that it can, albeit of course with challenges here and there. Mama Winnie taught us ukuthi lendlela yinde. We have to walk in this path. Somewhere along the line, we will fall and get up. And I think most of you heard Zodwa, who's been with her for a very long time, speaking specifically, somebody that lived with her on day-to-day basis, somebody that expressed Mama's last words, which were related to church, related to God, related to just building South Africa. I think that this woman made it possible for some of us, Lindiwe Zulu, today to be able to sit here and express the way I'm expressing myself, because she believed we are going to have a better South Africa as a way forward. Because I think while we go deep into who she was, what she was, for me it's beyond that now. For me, it's like, here is her story, here is her history, here is what she did. what are we going to do about it? How are we going to enable the younger generation to draw strength from what Mama Madikizela Mandela did? What will we do to get young women in particular? Now we have a movement almost that says, I am Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Now we have women who are wearing the dookie and saying the power is in my dookie. Some other people can dismiss that, but it's the power that Mama Winnie gave to us to say, even when I'm gone, I want you to go back and look at what did I do? What did I do it for? And make sure that we take it for. So the younger generation of women who are coming, nobody will ever take away what Mama Madikizela Mandela did for this country. I'm saying to the younger generation, when you are as old as her, what are you going to be telling your own children and your grandchildren? Because she did tell her story, she lived her story.
DG, I wanted to ask about the recording of this kind of history, which the Minister has alluded to. And of course, there are girls being born right now. There are also boys being born right now who will not have lived in the lifetime of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. They will go to books for information about what her life was all about. In terms of how we go about recording that history, how do we do it in a way that memorializes her struggle, that doesn't detract from the pain of her struggle by perhaps turning her into a deity or an icon, kind of entrenching a belief that children who are coming through and will have to be the generation's next leaders will not be able to reach that level of courage or bravery because they're simply different to the kind of woman who was forged in the fires of struggle decades ago?
Maybe let's start with there are various forms of memorializing people and immortalizing them. And then with Mama Winnie, I think we must start first with really saying it was good she had an opportunity to participate personally on the documentary because, you know, propaganda and misinformation is worse when it's told by those who tried to conquer her. This documentary will give us an insight into her own mind and her own thoughts and her own experiences. It's the first thing where our young children and even this current generation would hear from her through this documentary, not through Jennifer Hudson, you know, the movies where there are actors. So that's the first thing, that we must make sure that we document all our stalwarts and our living while they are alive, where they tell their story, so that nobody else tells it differently or twist it. I think the second thing, of course, as you said, is a question of how does South Africa really centers history, particularly South African history, away from the old history that we were taught in education. So curriculum and the history writers must write history of South Africans in books based on while they are alive or based on factual research, talking to people who might have lived around those people. So we need history to be taught in our schools about the lives of Mama Mandela and everybody else who have been part and parcel of this struggle. The third thing, of course, are visual symbols that will assist us in terms of whether it's monuments that we create, where people will always go and say, what was this bravery all about? When you go in America, you will see there beautiful things about Martin Luther King. You know, it's written, his words are written there. Visitors will. So we need that. We can also have then the movies themselves. But my view is that we must be able to document, to archive the history of our icons. And that it must be taught in schools because it's about also your identity, this thing. If you don't know what it means to be a South African, to be yourself and what you went through, you will not be able to understand what it means to treasure your identity as a South African. So it will always assist us if our young kids from very early age are taught about values of a brave South African. We move away from, at this stage, because history is taught by the conquerors most of the time, you'll find that when they talk about Napoleon Wars, you read about that, it's wars of bravery, conquer. But when they write about Shaka, then they will talk about barbarism. So we need to change the narrative so that South Africans have positive sense of self and self-worth. In that way, we will create a very dynamic citizenry in this country and will take South Africa forward. Without self-worth and self-confidence, without your pure identity pride, you can't create a South Africa envisioned in our constitution. And that is why I believe as arts and culture, we have this mammoth task to memorialize in multiple forms all our history, including our icons who contributed to where we are today.
Thank you so much. Some lovely thoughts to end with there. I thank the both of you for coming into studio this evening. Lovely to have both of your perspectives. Arts and Culture Director General Vusi Mkhize and Minister Lindiwe Zulu joining us in studio this evening.